Let's see if I can knock one of these out in less than a half hour this time. Back again with the fire cards from the DMP set. We are getting close to the end. I just got nature after this and we'll be done. Let's get started. First up, we've got Baby Zop. It's a firebird, 3 mana, 2000 creature. While all cards in your mana zone are fire cards, this creature gets plus 2000 power. This is a pretty cool card. I think it's probably just a bit too slow to really work in a mono fire rush deck, although I could certainly be wrong. I mean, the 4000 power is nice. But if ever there's a slightly slower version of a mono fire deck, a more aggro-y version, mid-range version, or something like pseudo mono fire that maybe just has some multi-sibs or shield blast or something, then could I see this having a home somewhere like that? For sure, for sure. Um, Overstated creatures in the mid game of those types of matchups can be very useful. Next, we have Bolmedius Steel Dragon with a couple of alternative artworks. It's a 7 mana, 7000 power creature. It's an armored dragon. It has Double Breaker, and whenever this creature would break a shield, your opponent puts it into his or her discard pile instead. It's a very powerful effect. Definitely like potential to be somewhat oppressive and game warping in a similar way to something like Haven or Infernus or Andromeda. But the fact that this card doesn't do anything on the turn you play it and actually has to successfully land punches in order for its effect to go off means I don't think this card is probably likely to see the same level of impact that those cards are. Not to say that card isn't threatening, it certainly is. It demands a response from your opponent, or else you're just going to start losing shields left and right without any ability to do anything about it. Anytime a card goes and breaks one of the core conceits of the game by saying, oh yeah, no, you don't get free card advantage whenever I start winning, kind of is definitely demands some attention. And obviously the Armored Dragon tag is nice. I guess I should probably have led with that whole thing. Key things to be looking for in this set. There are some evolutions that are Rock Brutes, and also evolutions that are Berserkers. But we're also going to see some Dragon support cards as well, so definitely be paying attention to those tags in particular. And yeah, this is a dragon that's obviously huge, but Dragon already has, it doesn't have really a shortage of good high boss monsters. I could definitely see this seeing a slot there, or maybe in some kind of mid-range or control deck as a fun of, or as a potential win condition. But I mean, control decks they can win with. They don't have to attack at all. They can just win by decking out in many cases. So I don't know, having something like this, it's a strong card. I'm not sure where it fits though. Next we have Brawler Xyler. It's a 2 mana, 1000 power Berserker. It's got powerful attack plus 2000. Um, Berserkers are kind of lacking. I think the only 2 drops they have in Kaijudo are just a couple of 2 drop 2000 vanillas. So I basically included this just to expand that pool a little bit, give a few more interesting options. Um, but yeah, I don't. Berserkers are in a weird place. I probably should get to it when I actually get to the better cards in the pool. Cannoneer Bargon, 4 mana, 4000 power Stomper. It's got Shield Blast and Skirmisher. Sort of an interesting Shield Blast creature slash on curve defensive creature. I know like Dingorger saw a lot of play in early Gauntlet format, and part of that was rotation, the limited card pool, but also kind of having a creature that could trade with your opponent's low level creature had some merit. The skirmisher tag kind of works as a bit of a deterrent, just discouraging your opponent from attacking with those weak creatures, but not outright preventing it. Um, I could see this cord filling a similar role, but it is much more of a softer deterrent. Um, I don't know. It's an interesting card, but it's probably not a card that's going to like. I have a hard time seeing it make too much of an impact, if any. Next we have Cardosaur, I believe this is a Duel Masters Plays exclusive. It's a 4 mana, 3000 power Rock Brute, and its text is Shield Blast. It's going to see some comparisons to another Rock Brute, Shield Blast, that creature that comes up a bit later that is definitely more useful. But yeah, I guess if the Rock Brute thing actually was a deck, then maybe you'd consider this. It's just a guy. Cavalry General Curatops. 3 mana, 2000 power, Dracon. This creature can attack untapped creatures. Little Hissy never really got much time to shine. Maybe it did just before Dragon Strike. I obviously don't have a whole lot of data on what people were playing back then. But, I don't know, having one that has a more useful tag in the Dracon tag, I included this just to see if maybe that might make the card design a little bit more palatable. Something like Blastwitch Slaver being played to bump this up to 4000 power and be able to eat, one of your opponent's creatures on turn 4. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Next we have Choya the Unheating. It's a 2 mana, 1000 power Berserker again. It's got powerful attack plus 1000, and it's got the effect whenever this creature becomes blocked, battle doesn't occur. It's a bit of a unique effect. I honestly, I don't think it's good. Like, I guess being able to force an opponent's sort of just negate the opponent's ability to defend themselves is sort of interesting. Um, but like most blockers that people actually play have the ability to attack back on the crackback. So unless you have your own blockers, or unless you want them to attack with the blockers, then you have an open field the next turn or something. I'm not sure if the ability is really all that good, but it is different. It is interesting, and we did need Berserkers for sure to facilitate the evolutions that are coming up. So I included it, and yeah, it's I don't know. At the very least, the dude deserves some props for wearing those massive like springs on his feet. Anyway, next we have a card that is going to make an impact, I think. If the Dragon deck is still playable with all these new cards added, this will be a part of it for sure. We have Coco Lupia. This thing has not one, not two, but 3 alternate arts besides the main art. It's a 3 mana, 1000 power Firebird. I guess the thing's cute. That must be why they did it. Its effect is you tap 2 less mana cards to summon dragons. Each time you summon a dragon this way, tap at least 2 mana cards to summon it. So while the mana reduction effect is a little bit weaker than the Kaijudo Firebirds, and would apply, both would apply. I should have muted Discord. Let me do that very quickly. I've done it the last couple times, and I just forgot this time. And the effect would still apply. So like if you had Nyx and Coco Lupia out, then you can reduce the cost below 2, as I understand it to work anyway. I guess that's maybe something we'll have to arbitrate when we get there. But yeah, those cards obviously, Lux and Nyx and Umbra even, saw a tremendous amount of play for their ability to just make the dragons that were kind of already strong just that much more unfair. This thing lets you curve turn 3 Coco Lupia, turn 4 Lyra, just by itself, no other anything. And yes, it doesn't have any extra bonus effects, but a 2 mana reduction is huge. And apparently I didn't actually turn the notifications off. There we go. That was the right button to hit. Anyway, this card's bonkers. If dragons are still good with this card pool, this card is gonna see play. My plan at the moment is to consider running, like there's already some issues in the Kaijudo card pool that different players have voiced over the years, and I think there's like merit in considering a ban list anyway, but the I specifically do want to like try to establish something after this set is in circulation and we play with it a little bit. And if there is a problem, like say if the dragons are too strong, maybe we actually go and take the plunge and go and ban Herald. It's a card people have been talking about for a while. It obviously does very unfair things. Maybe that would make some of these dragon support cards palatable then if you just don't have that another gross enabler in there too. But unfortunately, this isn't the last dragon support card that's bonkers. There's a couple also that are less bonkers, but we'll get to them when we get to them. Next, we have Cratersaur, 3 mana, 2000 power Rock Brute. While you have no shields, this creature gets powerful attack plus 3000 and can attack. And I found a typo. I'll have to fix that. And can attack untapped creatures. Man, I caught two when I was prepping this, and I missed that one. Yeah, this card probably isn't very good, but it is a 3 mana Rock Brute. It's just a little bit. There's just the whole effects that trigger while you have no shields thing is just not super strong on its own right. The light had a couple of those cards too. I just don't know if I see that being an impact card, but the fact that it's a 3 mana Rock Brute might be relevant. Next we have Deadly Fighter Braid Claw. So 1 mana, 1000 power Dracon with a few alt arts as well. And this creature attacks each turn of Fable. Yeah, it's Blaze Belcher, but it's a Dracon. This is one that's definitely gonna be impactful too, giving Fire Rush another Blaze Belcher, and one that actually has a useful tag at that. Wow, it's gonna be impactful. I mean, we've all been there where the fire player just drew like 2 Blaze Belchers in their opening hand and you didn't actually get to play a game that game. And those games will be a lot more prevalent with this card in the pool. Spoilers: Nature's getting an attacking 1-drop as well. That is also concerning. This sort of thing, we'll just kind of have to play it by ear a little bit and see where the metagame goes with this kind of access to these extra 1-drops. Obviously, Duel Masters you could run 4 ofs, so like they had access to lots of 1-drops. Kaijudo only gets 3 ofs, but having multiple cards that do the same function will kind of leads you to a similar position. We'll just to see what happens with it, I think. Next we have Gazaria's Dragon. It's a 5 mana, 4000 power armored dragon. While you have no shields, this creature gets plus 4000 power and has Double Breaker. Kind of similar thoughts to Cratersaur. It's probably not a good card, but again, the effect is a bit interesting and different from most of what the Kaijudo pool offers. Next we have Kamikaze Chainsaw Warrior. 2 mana, 1000 power Stomper with Shield Blast. Yeah, this is basically Fire's version of Pouncing Cricket, a card which saw a lot of play, and I could definitely see this seeing play as well. The Stomper tag isn't particularly good. The fact that it's just a 2-drop guy that you also might be able to get off of a shield on occasion and help you win in the crackback does seem very good. Definitely a card you would have to consider in a Fire Rush or aggro or maybe even mid-range list. Next we have Kook Pollen, another card with an alt art. 2 mana, 1000 power Firebird. This creature can't be attacked. One thing I got the chance to do a little bit with Fire Rush was examining some of the cards that kind of never saw significant play in the card pool, just due to various reasons. Like in the Dracons were kind of always seen as like the way to play the Fire Rush deck. Well, you kind of had to actually back in before Gauntlet, and so people really focused on that tag above all else. So Lava Leaper never really saw experimentation, at least in the lists. Most of the lists I saw on the Kaijudo channel website. And then They presented a similar card called Shredmobile in Eye of the Storm, which also never got physically released. So it wasn't until kind of experimenting with those two cards together, even in the post Eye of the Storm Kaijudo Dead format, it found that effect is pretty strong. Both those cards basically have an effect that prevents them from being attacked by something with 3,000 power or less. And Kukpalin just can't be attacked at all. The same body as 2 mana, 1,000 power dude. Yeah, that's a very strong effect. Makes dealing with a card like this very difficult if you don't have a blocker or an early game removal card. It's just going to keep threatening you, keep poking at your shields until you answer it. So very, very good card. Definitely, again, pushing the Fire Rush stuff that much more. Next, we have another Dragon support card, Lippy Porta. I believe this was a Duel Masters Plays exclusive. It's a Firebird, 2 mana, 1,000 power. All your dragons have powerful attack plus 2,000. So it's basically got the bad half of the Kanina's effect. I don't think this one is probably likely to see a ton of play. Like, I know Modest swears by Twin Cannon Maelstrom and everything, but this is just a little bit worse than that because it only affects dragons. It doesn't affect your other stuff. And I mean, the 2 mana is nice. I'm not going to say it's impossible that this could not have a role somewhere, but it's definitely not on the top tier level of Firebirds that support dragons. Next we have Magma Rex, 5 mana, 3,000 power Rock Brute. It has Shield Blast, and when this creature enters the battle zone, banish all creatures that have power 1,000 or less. Notably, this is reciprocal, so it does affect your own stuff as well, so there's a bit of a deck building decision, I think, that would go along with playing a card like this. So if maybe I want to avoid running 1,000 power creatures, but and it's definitely a targeted effect that would only impact certain matchups, but we know that like cards like Toxic Fog have seen significant play in this past in Drill Storm. So if that kind of strategy becomes a bit too out of hand, a card like this is pretty devastating against a board that has multiple 1,000 power creatures on it. And the fact that you retain the body as well is huge. Just like, hey, you still have a 3,000 power dude, bigger than, again, a board that's got a bunch of cheap creatures on it. Yeah, it seems like a very situationally appropriate card. And again, the Rock Brute tag is very possibly relevant. This is a card I could be way off, but I think this might be outside of maybe like Yellow Flame. This might be like Fire's best 4-drop now. We have Meteosaur, 4 mana, 2,000 power Rock Brute. When this creature enters the battle zone, banish target enemy creature that has power 2,000 or less. The Meteosaur at 5 mana was probably playable on release and maybe even a little bit beyond that, but just because of Fire not having a whole lot in the way of like mid-range tools, it definitely wasn't used beyond that. Dropping the power of a card like this, or the mana cost of a card like this to 1 to 4 is just huge. And I think there's also going to be like a big upswing in general of playing these cheaper creatures, even in decks that maybe historically wouldn't have. Stuff like Aqua Hulkus and these other like lower cost floater type cards, having them flooding into the game just makes me think that a card like this would definitely have a role in most cases. Even in a matchup where you, like against control, you wouldn't typically think this card would do much of anything. I think even control decks will probably be playing some of those cards. And yeah, it's just a very strong tempo play in that scenario. I don't know. I could be way off base, and maybe this card isn't really that good. And again, also a Rock Brute for what that's worth. I really should probably just cover the evos before I start talking about the creatures, so you have a reference for the what the factions are and everything. But I kind of didn't want to switch up the format after I've already done 3 of these. Next we have Mirror Force Dragon, 7 mana, 8,000 power, armored dragon, double breaker, and all of your non-dragon creatures have powerful attack plus 4,000. So kind of a similar card in many ways to General Skycrusher. A little bit stronger boost, but no enter the battle zone effect. Um, ultimately, I think this is probably just worse than General Skycrusher, but it does a little bit interesting, so I included it. Um, yeah, probably play General Skycrusher instead of this. Next we have Otherworldly Warrior Naglu. 6 mana, 4,000 power, Stomper. Powerful attack plus 3,000. Double Breaker. And this creature can't be attacked. This is an interesting one. It's too slow. I don't think this card actually sees play in any reasonable universe. But the idea of having this kind of unrespondable sort of guy is kind of interesting. I don't know. Yeah, cool card design, even if it's just a bit too slow to actually do anything. Next we have Pyrofighter Magnus, 3 mana, 2,000 power Dracon. It has fast attack. While battling, this creature gets plus 1,000 power, and at the end of the turn, return this creature from the battle zone to your hand. This is basically Duel Masters Wildfire Valkyrie, and in fact, this card in Duel Masters was basically just Wildfire Valkyrie, just with the Dracon tag. They nerfed it slightly though for DMP by dropping its power to 2,000 and giving it the plus 1,000 power when battling. I guess just to make it a little bit easier to out with like a Shield Blast removal spell or something. Which I'm not really opposed to. I think that kind of card can be obnoxious in some situations, just not being able to respond to it. That being said, the fact that you actually now have two, you have the Valkyrie and this, is intriguing, and also the fact that it is a Dracon might be relevant, which is really why I included it in the pool, even though it arguably is otherwise strictly worse than Wildfire Valkyrie. Next we have Scarlet Skyterror, 8 mana, 6,000 power attack raptor. It has Double Breaker, and when this creature enters the battle zone, banish all creatures that have blocker. Another reciprocal nuke effect. Crimson Wyvern is not reciprocal. It only affects your opponent's blockers, and then so does Blaze Helix. But the fact that this thing is also sort of a boss on its own right, the 6,000 power Double Breaker, and can be played around something like Infernus and stuff too. I think there's some merit to it. Like, and not every deck is going to be playing their own blockers necessarily. So having a card like this, as opposed to just defaulting to Blaze Helix, is interesting. I think. Um, there's some decks that might prefer if they do want to run this sort of banish all blockers effect to get around Haven or whatever, that they would consider this instead of Helix for sure. Oh, and I actually this gets around like Alcadius too. So I guess in a really crunchy control deck that managed to develop Haven and uh, Alcadius, you can actually play this one unlike the other option. Next we have Snip Striker Bullraiser. 2 mana, 3,000 Dracon. If your opponent has more creatures in the battle zone than you do, this creature can't attack. Yeah, this is an interesting one. It definitely feels like there would be applications for it. Just to overpower 2 mana Dracon, of all things, too. But the downside is real, especially for a deck that's trying to win ASAP. The nice thing about a deck that has that kind of curve, you're probably going to run several Evos, so you can always just evolve it if your opponent does develop some degree of board control. But yeah, the downside is real. I don't know if this would make the cut in rush decks. It maybe has better shot in something more like an aggro deck um, that is more worried about the power and the tempo and stuff. But it's a cool card. Definitely an interesting piece in the fire aggressive toolbox. Next we have Super Explosive Volcanodon, 4 mana, 2,000 power Dracon. While attacking creatures, this creature gets plus 4,000 power. This is not really that good of a card, but it's... I guess it technically does attack stronger than any other fire card at 4 mana without an evolution or whatever. So, next we have Torch Clincher, 3 mana, 2000 power Dracon. While you have another fire creature in the battle zone, this creature gets powerful attack plus 3000. So technically, yes, there is a Dracon already that's a 2000 with powerful plus 2000. And there's also another fire creature that's a 2000 powerful plus 3000. But it's not a Dracon. I don't think that either one of those card designs are particularly compelling to me. But again, kind of have to fill out the last few slots with something that maybe isn't strictly speaking going to dramatically change the card pool. Next we have a card that probably would. We have Toto Pipichi, 3 mana, 1000 power, Firebird. All your dragons have fast attack. Whew, this one kind of concerns me. Like, Hyperspeed Dragon had the downside of being kind of big on its own, like you couldn't play it on the same turn you were playing other dragony stuff. But, once it stuck, it definitely was a problem. But it also only affected armored dragons, not every dragon. This thing being 3 means you can play it in some cases the same turn you play another dragon. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if the dragon deck really needs this effect per se, but it probably would use it if it had access to it. And I could even see other decks taking advantage of it too. Something like an Agorix deck being able to replay this from the discard pile, or I guess even the other one, Dracothane, and then granting fast attack to that creature when it's revived. So yeah, this definitely feels like a card that has some potential to see play for sure. Combo wombo turns and such. Next we have Twin Cannon Sky Terror, 7 mana, 7000 power, Attack Raptor. It has fast attack and double breaker. So it's basically just a 1 mana reduction on the classic Bolt Tail Dragon. Bolt Tail Dragon kind of had already been power crept a little bit because of Kuth the Dervish, and Billion Degree has its own separate sort of niche as well. This is notably not a dragon though, so like it's not like strictly better than the other ones, but like for the decks that do run it, the kind of ramp aggro type stuff, I guess mid range is probably the more correct term. This might be a better option in some cases because of the reduced cost. At the very least, having multiple options is always good. Next we have Valiant Warrior Exorius. 6 mana, 4000 power, Stomper. Powerful attack plus 3000, double breaker, and this creature can attack untapped creatures. So it's sort of like Morna that costs 1 mana less, but is also a lot worse statistically. This kind of fills a similar role to that otherworldly Warrior Naglu. I don't really see this having a niche, but it was kind of a cool card, so included it. Last among the creatures, we have Velrika Dragon. 7 mana, 7000 power, armored dragon, double breaker, and when this creature enters the battle zone, search your deck. You may reveal an armored dragon from it and put that creature into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. 7 mana is just a little bit late for this sort of floating effect, but the ability to search any armored dragon is pretty cool. There are obviously a lot of good ones. All the Tatsurians, the Infernus, Herald, Hyperspeed, General Skycrusher, Napoleon, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff and some Evos, but I don't know if the decks that run those cards would necessarily need this. A lot of those decks would just run Crystal Memory or one of the nature cards that's coming up that will be able to search creatures in general. So yeah, I'm not sure if this is super necessary addition to like your dragon decks, but it's cool to have for sure. Next we have the evolutions. First we have Armored Blaster Valdios, 4 mana, 6000 power Berserker. It's an evolution that goes on a Berserker. It has double breaker, and each of your other Berserkers get plus 1000 power. If this card somehow came out before Restless Configuration, I would think it would actually be really solid. Fire kind of lacked that 4 mana 6k double breaker card for a long time, but as it is, most situations where I'd consider this, I think I would be running Conflagration first. Um, that being said, the kind of aura buff thing for other berserkers is kind of cool. And obviously, the card in and of itself is fine. It's just whether or not it's actually worth the time and trouble. A card that I think maybe makes berserkers actually worth time and trouble would be Divine Machine Armor Valborg. Again, it's a Berserker Evolution creature, 3 mana, 5,000 power. It evolves onto a Berserker. It has Double Breaker, and while attacking this creature, or this gets 1,000 power for each other fire creature you have in the battle zone. Um, yeah, the other two like 3 mana evolution fire cards that double break are both have issues. The fact that they're both 4,000 power and have like a powerful attack effect means they are a bit susceptible to getting attacked back. This is less susceptible to that. Now, I don't know genuinely. I honestly I doubt that it's worth the deck building cost of playing Berserkers instead of playing, not having a restriction at all, or having the Dracon restriction, which gives you, I think, just a much better rush suite. Um, Dracons have 2/1 drops, Berserkers have 0. But if it is compelling to run Berserkers, I definitely think that this card is the reason it is compelling. It is a good card for sure, and I think it is better than the other options in the slot. And last, we have the Rock Brute Evolution. Um, Double Geyser, Giant Rock Beast. 6 mana, 8,000 power. It does evolve onto a Rock Brute. It has Double Breaker, and when this creature enters the battle zone, banish target enemy creature that has power 6,000 or less. Yeah, a very solid, pretty high power enter the battle zone banish effect. And, 8,000 power is reasonably big. Um, it's not amazing. It's certainly something like Anjac would just kind of laugh at this card, and as well as lots of other Evo decks. But I definitely feel like this effect combined with like Meteosaur specifically makes me like think that maybe it's worth exploring Rock Brutes a little bit. Um, it's probably still not amazing. Like I don't think there are any 2 mana Rock Brutes even with this extra pool. Um, so you're looking at like 3 mana and up for your baits. There are a couple of Shield Blast creatures, which is cool, but yeah, you're at the very least it's more of a mid-range style fire aggro deck as opposed to the rush style for sure, which may just the tools may or may not just be there to make that actually a reality. Cool card though, definitely like the design for sure. Now onto the spells. We have Comet Missile, 1 mana spell. It has Shield Blast and banish target enemy creature that has power 6,000 or less and blocker. So yeah, this is just a cost-reduced, slight utility-reduced version of Kaijudo's Comet Missile. But there really isn't a whole lot that this doesn't hit that people actually play. I mean, I looked through the pool, like, yeah, maybe General Dorzim, Magistrate Jazuri, um, Twilight Archon, just about anything else that you would normally want to hit with Comet Missile. The other Comet Missile you hit with this Comet Missile. So having the mana reduction is pretty huge for a deck that is pretty low to the ground and doesn't have a ton of mana to play with. I definitely feel like this would see play in those fire rush decks and more or less in that scenario outclass the other Comet Missile. Next we have Drill Trap, 7 mana, 6,000 power. It's a Shield Blast, banish target enemy creature that has power 6,000 or less. There was a 6,000 on the text, I promise. um, Finally, Justice for Kaboom. Uh, yeah, the Kaboom was always one of those cards. I never understood why it wasn't a Shield Blast spell. But I don't know if this would seriously see play. Like, Tornado Flame doesn't really see play as it is. And, like, we have these new upgraded Terror Pits and Root Traps. Natural Snare is what it is in Duel Masters that exist. So I don't know if this is like level of consideration, but it's cool to have an upgraded card that does add some extra functionality to the fire spell pool. Next, a card that I probably would see some play, Searing Wave, 5 mana spell. Banish all enemy creatures that have power 3,000 or less. Put one of your shields into your discard pile. This card and the next card both have an interesting cost of like burning one of your own shields, but the upside is immense. A big board wipe on turn 5 is crazy. I mean, obviously, to play an effect like this, you normally have to wait till like turn 8. Being able to drop it early, or maybe you'll drop it as part of another turn when you're playing other cards, is powerful. Definitely have played against this a little bit in the progression series I was doing with Modest, and yeah, this card is bonkers. So, definitely a compelling addition to a fire control deck for sure. Maybe even other slightly faster decks as well. I could definitely see it maybe in a mid-range list as well. Last but not least, we have Volcanic Arrows. It's a 2 mana fire spell. It has Shield Blast. It has Banish target enemy creature that has power 6,000 or less, and it has put one of your shields into your discard pile. This probably would get a lot of play alongside so in a lot of these rush, maybe even aggro lists. Again, very high tempo sort of play, being able to remove an opponent's creature, basically any game creature, at the expense of one of your shields is pretty strong. Um, it's an interesting card too, as from the shield blast perspective of when you pick it up from a shield blast, do I use it or not? Am I dead with it without it? It's kind of a fun little puzzle there. But yeah, definitely a very strong card. Um, very niche in what decks it fits in, I think. But those decks, it is very strong in. The whole getting rid of a shield thing is an expensive downside for sure. That just about covers it. Looks like I did not keep it under a half hour, although I'll blame all the technical difficulties, although I don't think there were 7 minutes of them. Anyway, the next video will be the last in this series, at least for the time being, of covering these Duel Master Plays cards as the expansion for Kaijudo. Thanks.